Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr. Welcome back to the Movers and Breakers podcast, where we dive into the world of construction and explore the stories of people and companies who are shaping the future of our industry. From the latest innovations to the challenges and triumphs of everyday professionals, we bring you the inside scoop of what's happening in construction. Today, I'm speaking with Matteo Pietrobelli, CTO of Oceanix. Thanks for joining us, Matteo.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you have a very, very interesting background. We connected through LinkedIn a couple of months ago. But you have worked at several companies in the States and abroad. And before, it's all led you to this job that you have right now at Oceanix, where you're building the future city. It's a floating city, and it's right off the coast of Korea. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, in the city of Busan.
Before we dive into that, I would love to talk about your journey to this point, because I think it's very inspirational, it's very diverse, and we could learn a lot from your experience.
Yeah, I don't know about how much about learning, but I'm happy to share my journey. I started I would say every civil engineer or person that works in our industry would start after my degree in structural engineering from Rome. I basically was sent in China to work on a research project. It was actually part of my graduation thesis, and I spent there almost a full year over there, and working on a research project, doing some testing on a lab for piers in earthquake environments. And after that, I graduated, and I found a job that sent me in Africa, North Africa, in Nigeria. Worked there for a period. Then started to work for a steel fabricator, one of the best steel fabricators in the world, which is Italian. The company had me working on different projects in Italy, Europe, so to say. So I worked in between Italy and Switzerland. And then they sent me to the United States to work on in New York on the Hudson Yards project. And then,
did you have any idea early on when you were in college that you would be working in 5 continents in the first couple of years after graduating?
I didn't know, but honestly, that was a little bit I would say what I hoped for, because I was looking for some challenges. It's not something that I'm not used to, because with my family we moved a lot during my youth, so it's not something that I'm not used to, and actually I look for it.
You forgot to
say, yeah, actually I enjoy it very much, but it also was a certain way a fruit or an effect of the historical period in post 2008 economic crisis. Because I graduated, it was 2013, and economically, I would say in-house in the country, in Italy, there was not a lot of, I would say, stimulating jobs, so to say.
Okay.
And so it was almost a given that you would be sent out, right? And that's how it happened. I mean, for me, it was totally fine. I actually enjoyed it very much.
But it turned out to be a good thing for you. I mean, not that economics, the 2008 crash was awful, but yeah, the experience you got out of that, working in different countries, interacting with different cultures, understanding how different structural systems are in China versus Africa versus Europe versus the States, that gives you a really well-rounded perspective on construction.
No, it does. I mean, it helps a lot. It provides I would say more of a overview, and it also opens definitely your mind if you're open to it, so to say, as well, because it can work both ways.
That's true.
But yeah, no, it worked out pretty well. And he actually it helped me propel for I think a career that so far has been interesting, it's been stimulating, it's been challenging, but it's been satisfying, which I think, I guess, at the end of the day, that's what is important, right?
Yeah. So it actually took you to Hyperloop for a couple of years in California too, right?
Yeah, I wasn't in California, I was in New York, and but yes, I worked for Hyperloop as a consultant. I worked on a couple of projects in New York from the Delta Terminal in LaGuardia to the Long Island Railroad, third track renovation project, the Tappan Zee Bridge, the new one, which is called the Governor Cuomo Bridge. It's the new cable stayed bridge. I work on the structural health monitoring systems for that bridge. Then I ended up working with other companies. I ended up opening and managing the New York office of an engineering firm from Italy, and then working on an engineering firm, very established engineering firm here in New York, specializing in high rise. And then eventually I joined the Oceanix.
So what is the motivator that led you from a career in building and designing bridges and skyscrapers to this really forward-thinking, futuristic city? Was there something inside you you felt kind of you needed a change?
Well, I mean, look, what happened is that working with Hyperloop, which it's a project that still ongoing, so to say. So it required an inclusion, or I would say bringing together a lot of different specialists. And that was like an unusual project, right? Yeah, it is based on maglev, but then it's in a tube, right? A tube that has the air sucked out of it, which means you are in an environment with less friction, etc. So, and that goes with all of the different complicancies that you can imagine go into a project like that, right? And that's when I started to be exposed to the world of systems, so to say, right? Of how to approach a project, not from like a project perspective, which is something that I think we are more used to from in the civil engineering world,
but larger than just the project.
Yeah, but from a system perspective, right? We ended up realizing that there were people that never really worked with each other, in coming from the aerospace industry, or coming from the avionics or aeronautics industry, especially considering the aerodynamics of the capsules, the life support systems in case of an outage in the tube, or emergency system, things that are very much foreign to, let's say, a normal, I would say, more standard civil engineering project. And that really, I would say, gave me a little bit of a different perspective of how, if you want to do something that is a little bit new, you have to bring in
diverse people from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, right. And if you need to bring people from diverse backgrounds, you need to find a way to actually orchestrate all of them in order to, achieve what needs to be achieved from a final product perspective, right? And that's what I would say propelled me to think about a little bit differently from the more established, engineering projects, right? And so that's when I got exposed actually on the 3D printing for concrete. That was when I was in Hyperloop. At the time, there were only 2 to 3 companies worldwide. Now really an established, I would say, market. Not that it's established now, but now it's really booming.
It's crazy how fast that market has grown in the last 3 years. It's insane. Because I was looking into it. I made a video on the introduction to 3D concrete printing back in 2018. And there was such limited information back then. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's okay. So it was a very unusual time that gave us the opportunity to experiment a lot. And that's, I think I would say that through that experimentation, a lot of ideas spun off of it, and that's basically how eventually I ended up thinking about other type of applications. And that's when I was introduced, I guess, to Oceanix.
So let's dive into Oceanix. It's a floating city proposal. The first time I went to the website, looked into it, it seemed pretty outlandish to me. It was, and I'm sure people who come across it will say, wow, this is just as crazy as living on Mars. Like, what's the point of it? We have so much land on the Earth. Why do we need a floating city? But there's a genuine need for it in the near future.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is this, right? The website portrays very well, I would say, a sort of extemporaneous view of a floating city that can be in the ocean in the sense that it's floating, right? So, but the real question comes to the point of how far into the ocean, right? And that's where the answer that I think everybody is expecting is Oceanix is not trying to build a
little
community
island in the middle of nowhere.
exactly in the middle of nowhere, right? The overall design is driven by being very close to the coast. When I say close, I'm talking about literally less than 50 meters, right? So it's really a plug-in to existing coastal cities, and the idea was born because of trying to find a solution that is at the integration between I would say 3 to 4 problems or major problems that the world is facing. One of them is clearly the seawater level rising. It's something we're all aware of it. We might not see it, but in other countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and in Southeast Asia in general, it's been happening. It's been happening in Africa as well, and you're seeing it. And there are entire communities that have been pushed,
displaced,
right? So it's an existing problem, and it's a problem that if nothing changes, we might end up facing as well in I would say in the western side of the world where I'm residing in a sense. So
it's one of those like out of sight, out of mind things. People don't we hear, don't see it, so they think the problem doesn't exist.
Exactly, right? Then you have to consider all of the secondary effects, which I call them secondary because they are an effect of a previous cause, right? Which is climate refugees. I mean, where are we going to put all of these refugees? And if we start to consider that certain areas of the United States, based on certain scenarios and models, might end up being in what they call the wet bulb areas, where you're going to have high humidity levels with excruciating hot temperatures, those are not livable environments. And not livable environments means you're going to actually displace other people as well, entire communities, entire cities, to about millions of people. And so the question is, there are areas for sure in the Midwest. There are areas for sure in more rural areas to build new communities. And those might end up, say, choices for somebody. But for somebody else, coastal cities might end up being the better option because at the end of the day, coastal cities represent, I would say, more or less 80% of the wealthiest city in the world. Right?
Yeah.
We consider
New York, Houston, LA,
right?
Yeah.
And that's because ports are there, commerce is there, and from commerce there is wealth, and from wealth there is investments, right? And so growth. And so it becomes appealing to actually move here. In addition to that, coastal cities or bigger cities that are on the coast are continually expanding because there are new, let's say, immigrants, myself included. For example, I came to New York, but immigrants not necessarily from other countries, but also within the same country. There are a lot of Americans that come to New York and they're not New Yorkers, right? So the city keeps expanding. The fact that there is a economically viable, of course, it's appealing to people. And so where you're going to actually allocate certain resources, or I would say certain real estate assets. And if you have seawater level rising, you have overpopulation, you have climate refugees. In addition to that, you also have ports that now are reaching the life expectancy of when they were built. And some of them, because of the way vessels are growing in terms of sizes, or because of other policies, they might not end up being renovated. They're going to be dismissed. And this is the case, for example, what is happening in Busan. Busan, the North Port is one of the biggest ones, is one of the busiest ones, but soon it's going to be, actually, is already going through what they call a redevelopment program, where the whole waterfront that used to be completely industrial is going to actually be residential and commercial, an entire new neighborhood.
But and cruise ships, right? That's the only one port that they would have.
That's the only one that would be left. So that means that you have an entire pond of water, I would say, which is a big blue field of water, of potential real estate, of prime real estate that can actually be used and developed. And Busan is not the only city that has that, I would say, opportunity. And so that's how Oceanix was born. Oceanix was born to be exactly at in between all of the different problems and trying to find a solution that would actually accommodate or be able to actually solve these problems from a certain perspective.
So I grew up in Dubai. We had this conversation before, and Dubai built the Palm Islands and the World Islands by dumping sand into the Arabian Sea, Persian Gulf, and then building up land until it was fairly stable, and then they started consolidating the foundations and then building houses and hotels and all that on it. Is your project in Busan similar to the way they built the Palm in the World?
No. So Busan, I would say Oceanix, is actually a solution to also this type of approach, right? They call it land reclamation, which means that you gain sand from somewhere. You either dredge it from the seabed, or you actually get it from somewhere else, and then you dump it. And in dumping it, you slowly create layers over layer, and that basically create new land. First of all, it takes a lot of time because it's to settle. The effort is not really optimized in the sense that, of course, it's sand, so some particles might end up going in other areas, right? Or they're not really specifically sedimenting where they need to be. It's really costly, and costly not from a cost perspective specifically or exclusively, but it's very costly from
ecological point. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You're destroying entire ecosystems by adding land. And so what we wanted to do is finding a solution that was not driven by that, but at the same time was actually able to accommodate building on top of water, right? And so what we did is we had a floating platform that is able to accommodate all of the different subsystems within the platform, and is strong enough and stable enough and comfortable enough to then be able to accommodate a real estate on top of it. That's basically our solution.
What is this floating platform made of? Because it has to support entire buildings, multi-story buildings.
Yeah.
What sort of material are you all using?
We're actually using reinforced concrete. I mean, we ended up going with the closest solution that it's currently available for the size of the platform that we actually are developing. I just want to explain it because in Busan, the project right now, the size of a platform is around 2 hectares. We're talking about 4.9 acres, right? And that's let's say a size of a New York City block. So it's massive. It's really big. And therefore, the best option in terms of life cycle perspective, which means not just the design and the construction, but also the operation, the maintenance, the durability, etc. The best option in terms of materiality with current materials available, it's to go with reinforced concrete.
So is it just the shape of the island, the man-made island itself, that makes it buoyant? Is it anchored to the seabed but allows for a little bit of movement?
Yeah.
How much of it is it really a floating city?
No, it's basically, as you said it, right? It's a floating caisson, 2 stories inside. It's around 10 meters deep, so almost 30 feet. We have inside of the caisson, of course, in the same way a vessel works. It's floating because of buoyancy. So it's able to actually go up and down, so accommodate tides and any type of other type of let's say
movement. That's
exactly. But it's not moving naturally because it's anchored by what we call dolphins. They're basically piles that go to the ground. They're driven or let's say drilled, and the piles are able to withstand the lateral movements of the platform.
Okay, I see. And the islands themselves are, when I was going through your website, it seemed like you all are trying to build a self-sustaining city. You all have incorporated really interesting ideas: net zero energy, freshwater autonomy, zero waste systems, habitat regeneration, plant-based food, and shared mobility. And even though these floating cities are going to be, what you said, 50 meters from the mainland, they are meant to function on their own if needed.
That is correct. So, this is the other perspective, which is very important for us, is that construction industry represents overall around 40% of
40%.
of the total global emissions. That means that we clearly need to do something about it, right? Unfortunately, there are certain ways that are can be influenced by the private industry, by policies, or in general by building better and building more sustainably. And that's how we wanted to tackle it. So we decided to basically use and raise the bar from an ESG perspective. And the only way to do it was to actually tackle what are the typical systems of a real estate project. And they're for water systems, waste systems, energy systems. And then because of the fact that we are approaching the design from a circular economy perspective, we also integrated the food system and the mobility system and the community, right? So the overall design works in a way where we're able to be almost completely independent from the mainland. We of course have redundancy systems built in that allow us to basically guarantee functionality and operation.
It's
right?
almost like a grid-tied system. In case something fails, you can
that
still...
is correct. Yeah, exactly. Water and energy are the key, right? Which guarantees through energy, you also guarantee data. So you're able to basically have a completely, so let's say, innovative city that still works, even in case some of the autonomous systems or some of the more ecological systems might end up not having some problems or having to be maintained or to be replaced. But in general, we don't rely on that. We're able, based on geographies and based on the way we tailor the systems, we're able to actually gather energy from sun and wind. We are able to store it. We're able to resell it to the grid. Water is the same. We're able to actually capture the water, in this case, from rain, because of the location in Busan, and the rain levels in the last 25 years allow us to actually consider rain to be a viable option. The rain, of course, is stored, it's clean, it's polished, and it gets to a drinkable level that is equal to the drinkable level from the faucets right now in Busan, where people drink. Then, depending on the type of water and the way it's used, black water and the green water, we can actually recycle it and clean it again, and be used for, let's say, cleaning, washing, and the black water can be used for the landscaping, for irrigation, or for the aeroponic and the hydroponic system. So that is the way, is a closed loop. There is no waste. Again, in case there is a more consumption of water than necessary, we actually hook to the aqueduct. So water is connected as a redundancy to the platforms. And waste is the same way. Waste is dried independently of the type of waste. So of course, we have sanitary waste, we have organic, we have recyclable as well. And we have different subsystems in the whole that allow us to treat each one of them independently. And they then are disposed, depending on which one we're talking about, but they're disposed in a way that it's ecological and sustainable. For example, for the cardboard and the metal, we have compactors that bring them together, and they go into the mainland where they're going to be treated with exactly. And so that's the way it works. It's really closed loop. There is
but there's still a reliance on the mainland if needed.
If needed, of course, that is important, because safety and in general operability, it's priority number one, and we are absolutely not even trying to think about compromise there. But
because it's still a city, it's still part of Busan. It's just an extension of it. Why would it need to be completely cut off?
Exactly, and the size of the bridges, we're talking about 10 to 15 meters from the coast.
Yeah. From
the piers of the port. So it's a plug-in. It's literally a plug-in into the city, and is a sort of it needs to be represented as a transition between the land and the water, but no transition is perceivable. It's basically just an enablement.
Going through your website, those, like we said earlier, those renderings can be a little bit misleading, because when I talked to you and saw some of the other renderings, I realized the idea that you all have is very different. It's like you explained, it's like a plug and play, it's an extension of the city, it's not a floating country in the middle of nowhere. But I wanted to talk to you about the idea of systems integration.
Yeah.
For a project as complex as this, you can't just have people from the construction industries. This is not just about architects and engineers. It's pulling people in from naval engineering, from the agriculture industry. When you talk about hydroponics, it's a very diverse. I don't know. Even though Oceanix is such a small startup, you all have brought in a very diverse skill set in order to figure this out.
Yeah, look, I was also lucky because one of my previous startups was into aeroponic and hydroponic systems for vertical farming in controlled environment agriculture. So I had that level of exposure that gave me or allow me at least to be smart about it, so to say, right? But as you said, it's correct in the sense that we also had to include into the development of the first prototype a series of skill sets that are very diverse. People that come from the offshore industry, people that come from the submarine industries, people that come from the cruise lines and let's say more of the naval architecture, and we have people coming from the controlled agriculture environment. Then we have water experts. We have energy renewable systems experts, and so bringing them all together and then tailoring these specific systems to be used on a real estate project. And so that with specific requirements and philosophies of trying to really approach it from a circular perspective, not exclusively from a sustainability point of view, but really from a circular perspective, by taking into consideration the proximity to the transportation, for example, which is very important because you end up having buildings that are completely empty and people to go to the office consume so much gallons of gas every day. That is not really sustainable, right? So the idea was, and the same goes also from what goes into the buildings and what comes out of the buildings, such as the food they treat, the packaging, the way the packaging is disposed of, right? So all of that came into the design, and that's why we really are proud to say that for us it was really a circular economy and ecological effort to really bring those systems together and also to work from a circular perspective.
Yeah, I've come across ideas like this in the past. I mean, being an architecture school, we talk about ideas like this, the self-sustaining city that incorporates all these things. But this is probably the first project in the world that actually turned those ideas into reality.
Well, to talk about it from that perspective, I totally see also why, right? And we have the opportunity to start with a blank slate.
Yeah.
We have it because we don't rely on what they are, let's say, the legacy systems. If you go on a city like New York, you have legacy systems. You have aqueduct, you have the grid, right? And those are the systems that you rely on. You have to extend it, you have to plug it and into the new buildings once you actually start to build them, and tailoring them based on the new demand that is inside of the building or given from the building. But in our case, yes, we can of course hook into the redundancy, but those are redundancy systems. The way we design them to actually be completely self-sufficient. And we have the opportunity because we are building land on water, which means that we had to basically develop it from a self-sustaining system point of view, right? And not really relying exclusively, at least, on the legacy systems.
How close are you all to construction? I know we talked about it as though it's already started, but it hasn't started yet. You're still, the conceptual stage is done, schematic design's done, are you all in the design development stage?
So, this is the fact that this is so new and is really the first one that is going to be done is the first, we call it a prototype, which is going to be sort of a sandbox of also testing and having the system working. The process that we established with the city of Busan, because you have the regulatory approval process that is very important, is over 3 phases. We just concluded phase 1, So phase one of approval actually went through and it was a green light. We are starting phase two and phase three, and we're actually starting it simultaneously. So they're gonna move parallelly in our timeline, in our schedule. And the idea is to start construction by the third or fourth quarter of 2024.
That's pretty exciting. That's pretty exciting. And this is not just fancy renderings. That's what's, I wanted to bring you on the podcast to talk about this, because y'all have done testing on the foundations, on the systems. And I know that once you get out into the field and start building this, you all will face challenges, obviously, like every construction site does, and things might fail. You all might have to change your plans and develop a different system. But you all have thought this through very, very logically. This is not just some fancy idea and a fancy rendering. You all are doing your best to turn this into reality.
Yeah, and look, I think what we can do, and we're lucky, is that we can learn from previous experiences. Cable stay bridges or suspension bridges went through extensive trial and error, but they were built nonetheless because they were driven by a need. Same thing was for high-rise. I mean, high-rise was not a thing until really a few years ago, some decades ago. But in a grand scheme of things, it's really just a few years ago in terms of human developments. And but they ended up doing it, right? And of course, it required an innovative point of view, an innovative approach, which was thinking about it from a wind tunnel perspective. I mean, right? Wind tunnel were used into the aeronautic industry, but once you go way high with buildings, you end up in an environment where winds are a driver of performance, and the same goes for Hercules, right? And so, what I'm trying to say is, in a similar way, that's what we basically have done on doing our concept design and schematic design. We're going to go even deeper in doing the design development, but that's basically the approach that we use.
You all use those systems and adapted it to this project. You all may not be designing skyscrapers, but you all have learned about the technology that is being used in skyscrapers, like the dampeners, and you all have adapted it to this floating city.
Yeah, or to give an example, instead of having a wind tunnel, we have a water tank. I mean, water tank can be used to test offshore platforms and vessels for the longest time. They have smaller prototypes, so to say, or scale models, and they test vessel, just ships or offshore platforms in different wave environments to understand performance, acceleration, the response of the platform and the vessel to different sea environments, so to say, and that's something that can be done as well in our case.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say it's important. The way I've seen it is, or we have experienced it during the process, is to really see how existing technologies can be tailored or reused to actually solve a need or to solve a problem, such as our problem.
So the big question is, who's funding this? Because this is an experimental project, never been done before, lots of risks, obviously. Not saying it's bad or anything, it's a risky investment. How do you all manage to navigate the investment world where there's so much value put into the software side of like innovation? So something like this that is so forward thinking, but very, very long term. It's a very long term project. How do you find the right investors to back such a project?
Well, of course, there are other projects out there. There is the case of NEOM, right?
Yes.
Or the Octagon, or other really big and I would say innovative projects, so to say. In our case, the beauty of it is that we have established a system that can be built as a sort of a product, and is basically standardized. Our platforms are standardized to a certain degree of flexibility, which allow us to really approach them from a sort of a DFMA approach, like a design for manufacturing assembly, and that allow us to really consider our offering to be a product in our project, right? So we're productizing what used to be just perceived as a project. The beauty in this is that it reduces the risk, which makes it more appealing to investors. The other thing is we are a startup, and so we rely heavily on investments that come from VCs or other type of funds. And so far, we went through seed 1 and seed 2 with interest from our investors in continuing to evolve and to actually give us the opportunity to grow and to build and develop more our offering. And the same is going to happen with Series A. Series A is going to be our, it's actually starting soon. It's going to be our new fundraising round. And it's going to allow us to propel again the project. And the beauty in all of this is because it's geographically driven, we can rely heavily on local partners like real estate developers, local partners like construction companies that are believing in the vision, they're believing in the idea, and they want to be part of it. And so it really becomes not just an integrational system, but an integration of partners that believe in the idea and they're able to actually all together invest and propel the solution.
So Contech is a real buzzword in our industry right now. I've heard so many people talk about construction technology and the potential to change our industry and increase productivity. And what advice do you have for someone interested in Contech? Do you really think that it could change the future of construction?
I mean, I of course do not have an answer myself for that, but I think there's a lot that can be done in the construction industry. I think in general we're seeing a little bit of a shift. Of course, there's a lot of software out there, and it's important to be because the digitalization itself allow us to streamline processes and everything else. So it's that important. But I'm also realizing, or at least I'm seeing, that VCs and funds and investors in general are realizing that there is a saying in New York where hardware is the king. In this case, right? They don't say hardware is the king in New York, but they use something is the king. So in this case, is hardware is the king, and I think the construction industry is an example of hardware, right? It's of course propelled by software, it's propelled by processes, it's propelled by regulatory procedures and policies, but at the end of the day is hardware.
It's a built environment, yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So I think there is really a lot that can be done. We're just seeing the beginning. I mean, Hyperloop is an example. Catera was another example, right? And even though some of these companies are still going, or others went bankrupt, are just an example of a need that needs to be filled, of an opportunity, I would say, that requires some new visions to be propelled and to be realized. And I think the only way to do it is to actually have engineers, younger engineers, or even older engineers that have visions and that believe in that and they just follow through.
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree with what you say.
The 3D printing industry is an example.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is an example, and it wasn't my idea. I'm not a co-founder. I'm helping propelling this because I believe in it. But the Hyperloop is another idea. There is a lot that can be done. There is a lot going on in the off-site manufacturing, in the fabrication, design for fabrication and manufacturing. There is a lot is going through the computational design and the digital fabrication to actually streamline processes, reducing waste, increasing productivity. I think the real key in all of this is our industry. It's not a software industry in the sense that it requires to develop a workforce that is open to have an understanding of how software works, of having understanding how computational tools work, of an understanding of integration between digital and physical, and in streamlining all of these processes. Really, I think that is most likely what I believe is the next frontier, because that will drive the end product. That no matter what type of idea is out there, it will drive the end product.
You explained that so beautifully. Because we
are using it a lot, right? We're using a lot of computational tools and digital tools integrated, of course, with the physical product. But I think it's really about the workforce.
Yeah.
And if we continue to have a workforce that is used to, long due tools or approaches, we're gonna end up with the same tools, with the same results. Sorry, and out there is a new movement. There are new needs as well, and that's why there is a movement, and there is a demand for these skill sets. And so the way I see it is, I'm myself in middle of my career. I'm relatively young, so during my recent years, I had to reapply myself and learn new tools and acquire new skills. I think this is another thing. It's the future belongs to also who's going to be able to be flexible and to really adapt to demand and needs. And so that's probably what the construction industry will be in the future, I think.
That was excellent advice, Matteo. And I completely agree with what you're saying. I think we're seeing an opening up of the industry. The biggest takeaway for me from Oceanix is systems integration. The idea that, hey, construction is not a bubble. Let's, like with 3D printing, let's bring in material scientists. So let's bring in people from aviation. Let's bring people from the naval industry. That's how we can grow. We're going to have industries that fail, like Kutera, or go bankrupt and all that. But we could take those lessons learned, and maybe they had maybe a little unrealistic approach to construction. Maybe we need to tone it down a little bit, but the idea was really strong. The integration, the vertical integration, bringing in people from different industries, those ideas didn't fail, and that's what we need to take forward.
You're totally right. I think it gets to a point where an idea works because it was the right moment at the right time, the right idea at the right time. And, most of it is also related to execution. I think in general, the more we are seeing these trends and these efforts, if they're done, with the ethical approach right now, like driven by hype, I think it's going to add value and it's going to change and drive the overall AEC industry towards, I would say, like a new horizon.
Yeah. Well, that was wonderful speaking with you, Matteo. Thank you so much for explaining how Oceanix works and the intricacies of it. I'm really excited to see this under construction, and we definitely need to get you back on the podcast once things pick up and once you learn things a little bit more. And
looking forward. I am myself excited as well to see how this thing is going to evolve and develop. So thank you for having me, and really my pleasure.
Thank you, Matteo.